Hey everyone, it's Shoja Greerwan. You're listening to another great pod by the Cleveland Sports Collective. Go Browns.
Greetings, one and all. Welcome to the Cleveland Sports Collective, your home for all your Cleveland sports news. Today's show is all about the fantasy football. And Josh Brickner on today with us today. Josh, how are you today?
Doing good. Excited to talk some football today with John. Kind of talk about some general strategies and advice for your league drafts coming up, hopefully for fantasy football.
Well, Lord knows, Josh, I need help. That is one sure thing. I said so today. Like you said, we're going to get into the nitty gritty of getting set up, getting things rocking and rolling, and a few considerations as to different world we're living in now. There might be a few things that come up, but Josh, to get things going at the start of the league, you need to sort out your scoring system. At the moment, the big debate in our league, we've had standard scoring for the last 5 years. I'm a proponent of half point PPR. I want to move to. Am I right or am I wrong?
I would say you're right. I mean, I enjoy the full PPR, but I think the half point at least it at least gives you a little bit of kind of compromise for those folks that might not want to move. I think this is a big argument. Most people are moving away from the standard scoring. When I first started, standard scoring was a bigger one, and now it's I would say it's more the minority than the majority for standard scoring. And it's really important to know your settings when you get into it, because a lot of the player values change. And if you go into a league, let's say thinking it's standard scoring and it's half PPR or full PPR, that could really change your strategy. And you don't want to be drafting a standard league team where yardage and bigger plays are kind of what's going to get you, or a PPR league where a guy like Jarvis Landry gets a lot more value. So I would say that your league should move to the 0.5 PPR. I think it's kind of a good intro, and then if people like it, maybe go to the full PPR next year, the year after.
And with the like you explained there, you see a player like a Cole Beasley suddenly becomes a thing. When you go to a PPR or half point PPR. I think our problem in our league is that we have a couple of guys that don't follow football as closely as the rest of us, and they really get caught out, I think, with the PPR, because they really don't understand that like target share and stuff like that is a massive thing when you're moving to PPR. And I think that's why they're a little iffy, about moving. Another thing, Josh, that's come up today in our league at the moment, we have one QB, two running backs, two wide receivers, one tight end, one flex, one kicker, one defense. So the two big talking points we have at the moment. There's a couple of people in the league who want to get rid of kickers and defense altogether.
Yes.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
So, to me, I don't like picking kickers or defenses because I think it's a crapshoot. I think it's a lottery. And I think some lucky fecker every year, someone hops on a Jaguars from a few years ago, or whoever the defense, the Patriots from last year, or whoever, and gets, I think, an unfair advantage from blindly picking a defense with their 16th pick in the draft.
Yes, I am 150% in agreement with you. Ban kickers, ban the defensive special teams. It's a crapshoot, honestly, and you're right. It rewards kind of the less skilled players. What some of the leagues I've been in is what they do is they'll take those two spots and add two extra flex spots for a running back, wide receiver, tight end. I think that for those people that draft well and have a solid bench, it gives them an advantage. But in my home league, I've been pushing to get rid of kickers and defense for the last 5 or 6 years, and every year I suggestion, every year I have to duck because people throw things at me in our draft. So yeah, I understand that. I agree with you. Get rid of kickers and defense. Never take them till the end of your draft. There's always somebody that's going to take, Greg Zuerlein or one of those kickers early. I just laugh at those people and say, oh, there's another good player on the board for me. So get rid of kickers and defense is my opinion. Yeah.
Something I'm not familiar with, Josh, maybe you can explain a little to me about Superflex leagues.
Yeah, that's the league where you there's super flex. There's two quarterbacks where you have to start two. So that means uh, basically elevates the quarterback position value even more. The more common one is what's called the super flex, where you have the normal flex options, but then one of those flex options you can start a second quarterback. So that makes quarterbacks extremely valuable, and quarterbacks go a lot sooner. And that's why it's big to know your settings, because if you're going into a super flex league and don't know it, you could say, why it could be the third round. Why are these people taking quarterbacks? Everything I read says to wait on a quarterback because there's so many that can be pretty good this year. And if it's a super flex league, that's why. Because if you're in a super flex league, you really want to have two good starting quarterbacks. I like to have three good starting quarterbacks at least, because quarterbacks are extremely valuable. And sometimes if you want to kind of corner the market, you can get four or maybe even five quarterbacks and kind of corner the trade market. But that's a conversation for another day. But yeah, that's why knowing your settings is so huge. There's so many times people go into a league not knowing it's standard or PPR, or if how many of each position they have to start, if it's super flex. So it's really important to go to that rules page and check out the league scoring and settings.
Just in regards to then rankings, you alluded to just briefly there earlier, Josh, about the difference between PPR and standard scoring and stuff. Kind of average draft position is something I'm quite wary of with regards to. You tend to find players who did well last year will have an average draft position that is quite high due to recency bias, I think, and I think it's something you have to be careful with. And how is that reflected in the difference between standard and PPR? Obviously, guys with more target share, whatever, will rise up draft boards in PPR. But does it correlate with average draft position between the two strategies, between the two types?
I would say it's for both. Let's say you have somebody who had a really great last 3 or 4 games and won people championships. And I've been a victim of this. Everyone has. And in your mind, oh my gosh, this player helped me win a championship or go far in the playoffs. In a standard league, let's say they had 5 catches for 120 yards and a couple touchdowns. In your mind, you're thinking, oh, this player's ready to burst out, or maybe they just had really good matchups, or their team, they had some guys hurt on their team. So you really want to look at not only a past performance, but what kind of a system are they going to be in this year? Did they have a coaching change? Did they have a quarterback change? How's their offensive line? So especially for running backs. So I would say there's a lot more variables that go into it, and we all can be kind of a victim or prone to recency bias, but you really want to look at, has their situation changed? Now, if their situation's the same and they ended last year on a good 3 to 4 game run, then that's something you can look at. But if they have a offensive coaching change or anything like that, you really want to take that into account.
Right. So before we move off this, one brief example for the coming year that I find interesting. You'll find off every mock draft you're going in at the minute, Christian McCaffrey is flying off number 1. Are you drafting McCaffrey with your number 1 pick?
Yes, and I have in several drafts. Yes, I think there's not many running backs. I don't even know who it's. Reggie Bonifant, I think, is the Panthers' backup. There's not many running backs like McCaffrey who are legitimately 3 down, going to get targets and carries the volume that he's going to get. Him and Barkley probably a second. There's just not many guys that are going to get that kind of volume. And in today's NFL, where it seems like you have specialized, you have your third down pass catching, pass blocking running back, and your first and second down kind of short yardage grinder. And McCaffrey does both of those. So yes, he is the 101 ever and for always. Yes.
I have a theory, Josh.
Yes.
My theory for this year is I think McCaffrey had a pinnacle year last year. Like he couldn't really have done much more in fantasy terms, really an excellent year. And I think we're going to see a regression. Also, there's a lot of changes going on there behind him in Carolina. There's a lot going on. And Saquon Barkley has a second year behind a quarterback who's going to be much improved. They're hopefully improving that O-line in front of him. Again, like you said, nobody there. I think Saquon is a far superior running back. If you want to just use the term running back than McCaffrey. Maybe not as good, catching the ball. He's obviously not going to be targeted as much as McCaffrey, but I don't think McCaffrey's going to be targeted the same as he was last year. I don't see him getting the same amount of receptions, Josh. I think it was an exceptional year. So I think those two guys, I think they're going to meet a little bit. I think McCaffrey coming down and Barkley coming up, I think they're going to be a bit closer than people think.
Here's why I'm not sure about that. Teddy Bridgewater is infamous. I mean, the Saints basically build an offense around his short passing. I mean, because Teddy Bridgewater's never had a cannon of an arm, but what he does best is really short, precise passes, and that's where obviously McCaffrey shines as well. So I think McCaffrey will still be used in the passing game. He'll still be one of their prime, if not their prime target. And I just think when you have a guy like that, you want to get him as many touches as possible. So I think though with Bridgewater, he'll be better than, I mean, they had Kyle Allen and some other quarterbacks after Newton got hurt last year. So you got to think that they'll have a better offense overall in Carolina. So I'm still drafting McCaffrey 101, and I've actually had that situation in a few drafts for charity and some other leagues that have drafted already, where I've taken McCaffrey 101 over Barkley, and I would continue to do so.
I just might take your advice on that, Josh. You might have just
okay.
Right. My favorite part. This is my favorite part of fantasy, Josh. The plan, the strategy. You're going in with a strategy. I have done. I don't know whether they have names or not, but I've done it all. I have drafted 0 RB. I have drafted only RBs for the first 5 picks. I have done all of them to no success. So what are the main types of strategies? I said I'm familiar with a robust RB strategy with 0 running back strategy. They're kind of really the only 2 names I know for strategies going. But what's the general sort of consensus on plans?
The plan is really to be flexible, because I've had drafts where, oh my gosh, I'm going to go get 2 running backs right away because that's just what I want to do. But then Michael Thomas will drop down to the 2nd round, and I really just can't pass that up. I mean, he's the best receiver in the league, and if you get him in the 2nd round, that's huge value. And like I said on our last podcast, you really want to find those players that are going to outperform their draft position if possible. My thing is just to be flexible. I know 0 running back, it was the big niche. And a lot of times it could be, if you get 2 to 3 stud wide receivers, that's great. And some years, just because the running back position, there's so much injuries. So maybe those late round running backs kind of, rise to, cream to the crop. So 0 running back, it's not something I like to do, but it can be an effective strategy, but you almost have to nail it. Like, you have to pick the right stud receivers, and you have to make sure you get the right late round running backs. To me, it's in today's NFL, it's not something I personally want to do. I always say you want to do the best player available. So you don't want to pigeonhole yourself, say, okay, I'm taking 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and a tight end by the end of the 5th round, or I'm going to take them in this order. You want to just let the draft come to you, and once what's the best way to put it? And so once you're picked, the best player available that makes the most sense for your team is who you want to pick, if that makes sense.
Something that has been catching me out a little in my mock drafts. I've been picking. I sort of, when I'm doing mock drafts, I'll do a few picking at 1. I'll do a few picking at 4. I'll do a few picking at 12. Just to get a feel. And I'm finding that if I have the first pick in a snake draft, I don't like the turn when it comes back. Like, I like getting McCaffrey or Saquon, but when it comes to picks 2 and 3, I find that if you're trying to implement a strong running back flotilla, I generally tend to pick 3 running backs in the first 4 or 5 picks, at least 3 starting running backs. And I find that once you get to the turn, if you're not in love with the idea of Gurley or maybe Leonard Fournette or David Johnson, you're that's where you are at that point. So I have found that if you're picking at 4 or 5 or 6, that you're still going to get, Kamara might slip down to you, and then you have your, you know, your up as far as your Miles Sanders or someone like that. You know what I mean? You have other guys in those kind of areas that you'll end up with maybe two stronger running backs, better as a pair. Like it's kind of like I would prefer to have that option than to have McCaffrey or Saquon with the first pick, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. And honestly, that's a good point. I'm pulling up some Fantasy Pros ADP here for half point PPR. And yeah, that's a very good point because let's say, okay, you take Christian McCaffrey at 101. According to the Fantasy Pros ADP, as I'm looking at it here, at that 24th pick, now I don't think he'll be available, but Clyde's Edward-Helaire has an ADP of 26, but he is, and I just think, he's way gone. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, he'll be way gone before that. I just think that's his ADP average catching up. That's kind of a position where you might want to go receiver. You might want to go with a Kenny Galladay or or an Allen Robinson, or Mark Andrews or another wide receiver. So yeah, you're not always looking at the best running backs in that position. But yeah, I would say if guys like Miles Sanders, Kenyon Drake, Austin Eckler, that's really your cutoff for that position. If those guys aren't available when you're picking, it would end up being, 212 and then 301. I would say you want to look at the receiver that you like the most. So yeah, Kenny Galladay, Allen Robinson, OBJ, maybe DJ Moore, AJ Brown. So I would say you want to pick one of those game-breaking receivers. And for some reason, if George Kittle or Travis Kelce are there, that's a player I'm looking to target as well.
That's interesting. And another interesting thing, just to fit into that with home league drafts, we have some funny things happen in our home league drafts, Josh.
Yes.
We have guys draft Tom Brady in the second round. We have guys draft Cam Newton in the first and second round. We have Travis Kelce traditionally going first round. We have defenses getting drafted in the sixth and seventh round.
Yeah.
We have all that crazy business going on. And I'm sitting here laughing, but I can't win this league, Josh. and like this makes me think like, should I be drafting a defense in the fifth round? You know what I mean? Because if they're all doing it, why aren't I doing it? Another thing I see them commonly doing is drafting 3 quarterbacks. And like, we don't have that much of a turnover in the league of quarterbacks in the 12-man league like that. You'd need 3 quarterbacks. But then what happens is someone inevitably goes down in the year and is left with the choice of starting, Gardner Minshew or Nick Foles, and you have Ben Roethlisberger on your bench, and is looking good for a trade at that point. But is there any way to navigate around that, Josh? Like, you know what I mean? It's kind of, it's like, say for instance, there's a couple of players I might like. DJ Shark is a guy I like picking up, in those sort of first receiver kind of picks for me in the 4th and 5th round. Or there's a couple of guys in around those rounds. And now I'm thinking by the time I get there, they're probably going to be gone,
Yeah, first of all, I love DJ Shark as well, and I've been trying to get him in Dynasty. He's 23 and looks to be on the verge of a breakout. So I've been getting him anywhere, and I've been getting him in some redraft leagues as well. So you are 100% on with the DJ Shark. I'm a big fan of his. Yeah, I would say if you have guys that are taken, first of all, don't take a defensive that early. It's just, there's guys in my home league that'll do it too, and they're always like, "Oh, well, it makes sense," and you just roll your eyes and say, "Oh, good," and another good quality skill player will be there when I want to pick. Or if somebody's taking Tom Brady or Cam Newton in a 1 QB league too early, that to me, I look at that as, oh, good, there'll be another better player left for me. Now, I'm all about getting your guy, and we'll talk about this later, but don't reach too much. Like DJ Shark, yeah, he's about a 4th, 5th round pick, somewhere in there, end of the 6th. Somewhere, but yeah, you don't want to take DJ Shark in the 2nd round. I like him, but there's better players who have a little higher floor, which means DJ Shark has a high ceiling, but his floor might be a little less because their team's not going to be as good. And I like Gardner Minshew, but no one's sold on him, and they're just the whole Jaguar team is a mess right now. So if you can get a guy like Chris Godwin or Mike Evans or one of those guys who are a little more solid, or Kenny Galladay, I would take them before DJ Shark. So you want to get your guy, but you don't want to reach too much. And we can talk about that a little later as well.
I think that just looking at our show notes here that you gave me, Josh, paying attention to the flow of the draft. That is not a term I am familiar with. Can you talk me through that one?
Yeah, and what this is really keep an eye on the draft board. I don't know if your home league does it. If you have an in-person draft, I know kind of with the new normal here, most drafts are going to be virtually, which obviously they should. Please be safe and healthy, everyone. We don't need fantasy football season, helping the spread of COVID. So a lot of drafts will be virtual, but all of these websites should have an app, where you can look at the draft board. And kind of what I mean is you want to see what the people around you are doing. For example, let's say I'm picking at 11 in the 5th round of a snake draft, meaning that the 12th pick, which you said, or the 101, if you're the second pick, same thing, gets 2 picks in a row. And you're between drafting a receiver or a running back right there. And the person in the 12th spot hasn't drafted a receiver or running back. You want to take whichever player first, that either receiver or running back, whichever position they haven't drafted yet. So you kind of want to look around you, and you want to look even further down. Let's say you have a pick right there, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, should I grab? It's the 7th, 8th round of quarterbacks available, or should I take another position player and hopefully my player will be on the way back? You want to see how many other players have quarterbacks that are going to be drafting, how many picks they're going to have. So that's how you kind of let the flow of the draft come to you, because as much as you might want to get that quarterback, you could get another skill position player and he might be available on your next pick coming back around. It just, but you won't know that unless you really pay attention to how many people still have to fill up a position of, have to fill up those positions, or, are going to pick running backs, receivers, with the upcoming picks. I mean, sometimes people will go, like you said, you drafted 5 running backs. If, obviously if you're at 12 and I'm thinking, oh, well, John, I like this running back, this receiver, I really should pick this receiver because John's coming up and he has 3, he has 3 running backs and you're going to take 2, that obviously could happen, but you obviously want to play the odds and just kind of look at the draft board and see what other people around you need.
That's interesting. That is interesting. It's something to be honest, Josh, I never thought that far ahead in a draft. I am merely looking at what's in front of me and then praying that there's something left there. I tend to draft quarterbacks late. At the moment I tend to sit back and, I'll take my Ryan Tannehill, I'll take my Baker Mayfield, I'll take, that ilk of a player later on in the draft, much later on in the draft. And I tend to stockpile the running backs and wide receivers with the first 10 picks, really. So maybe 9 or 10 if there was a quarterback there that was tickling my fancy. I never seem to pick the right quarterback, Josh. I always seem to be picking 2 quarterbacks, and generally I'm starting the guy that I picked on the bench by week 3.
Yeah, it's quarterback picking can be tough. I mean, I know in my home league, obviously we live around Cleveland, so the guy who had season tickets to the Browns picked Baker Mayfield, no OBJ very early. In my home league, it's a 6-point. You get 6 point per passing touchdown. So quarterbacks go a little earlier, which you kind of have to. I'm always wait on a quarterback, but if you're getting 6 point passing touchdowns, then you might want to pick one a little earlier than you would in a 1 QB league. But you really want to look at that quarterback who's going to go later that can give you some upside. And well, I know in the next episode, we're going to talk about kind of break down the quarterback position. We can go into a little more strategy and who's going where and who to target. But I would say waiting on a quarterback's huge because you can stockpile the skill positions. You can pick your quarterback later and then pick your high upside guys, running back and receiver late. So you have a good core and you have a couple guys that can, that are boom bust. And if they boom, then you might have the league winner on your bench. So
it's an interesting point as well, Josh. You're talking about knowing your teammates and knowing the teams that they support. And, I know for a fact if I can pick up a Cam Newton, if I can pick up Adrian Peterson in the 14th or 15th round of a draft, and I have him sitting there on the bench come week 1 or week 2, I know a guy that's going to trade me a valuable player for Adrian Peterson, just because he was waiting on him to be drafted last in the last round and he was going to pick him up. There's little things like that you pick up over the years. Guys, there's one guy, he's a Falcons fan and Julio Jones is going to him. no matter where. Like he'll go first round, you know, could go second round. But if you have your head on and you're thinking, well, if I just take Julio now, like, you know, I could very easily trade Julio for an Alvin Kamara, you know, before the start of the season. So it's a crucial thing, getting to know your league mates like that, and it takes time.
Oh, yeah, that's huge. Now, I wouldn't jump in front of him in the first round to take Julio. I like Julio. But first, I would say you want to get because if something happens where he won't trade you Julio, then you're kind of stuck. You know, I don't know if Julio goes, you know, if you pick him in the first round, I don't know if he's going to return you that kind of value. So, but yeah, if your Adrian Peterson point was right on. Yeah, if you take him as one of your last few picks, because let's be honest, Darius Guice just got released. It was horrible, you know, the situation. We'll let it, but he got released. And Adrian Peterson, I mean, it just keeps on ticking. He might have a chance to be their starter. So, if you take him in the 13th, 14th round, and you know, you might be able to trade him for a guy that's going to be worth much more. Maybe not right away, but maybe in a few weeks. So that's a huge move to make. But obviously you don't want to pick these players too far ahead. But for another example is if you or I were in a draft, and I have a friend who, huge Browns fan, season ticket holder, loves Nick Chubb. I know if I'm going to draft with him, we've done some dynasty drafts and redraft where he's going to take Nick Chubb if he's there. End of the first round, early second, he'll take Nick Chubb no matter what. It's his favorite Browns player, and he'll be gone. So it's really just knowing that about folks you're with in the league, and their favorite players that you can dangle in a trade. Another way is if, let's say, I take Nick Chubb and someone says, "Oh shoot, you know, I really wanted him," or someone writes in the chat this year, "Oh no, you sniped me," or "You took him." That's just always keep that in the back of your mind, because if you want to make a trade, you know that guy wanted that player.
That's interesting, Josh. That's interesting. And then you're sort of getting back to ADP a little bit there, and like say, like with you know, I kind of, as I said, I struggle with the ADP a little bit, because I find a lot of guys that I draft with are kind of married to it a little bit. You can nearly guess the players that are going to go off in the next 3 or 4 rounds based after the 5th or 6th round. A guy that doesn't follow football as closely is literally either going on name or on ADP. So something I struggle with, and it's kind of like, you have a good topic, a good heading on the notes here, go get your guy, but be smart. That's I always feel when I'm reaching for a player, sometimes I always feel a little bit sort of unsupported by the data, if you know what I mean, with regards to, like, if you're projecting someone to have a bigger year this year, you're doing that based on your feelings, based on what you've seen on the pitch, on the field in the previous year, and the fact that there may have been positive changes, you know, and also you're looking at opportunity is a big thing. Like we alluded to with McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley, there's no one there to challenge them in their positions. But if you look at Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, you know, they're both going to have to eat. However, I like the idea of having Kareem Hunt on my fantasy team. And the reason I like the idea is because if anything happens to Nick Chubb, he is immediately the guy. And there's also an argument to be said for fantasy purposes that Kareem Hunt would be more valuable than Nick Chubb if he was on the team without Nick Chubb. And I mean that from a reception point of view. You know, I think Kareem Hunt outperformed Chubb in the last few games from last season. So then you have to marry that up to, okay, you could get a bit of value with a Kareem Hunt. And I don't know where his draft position is at the minute. I'm thinking it's around 6th, 7th, 8th round, in that kind of, you know, but like, it'd be a bit of a swing taking him in the 6th round. You know, if he drops to the 8th round, maybe that's value, you know?
Yeah, the 8th round, that's huge value. He'll usually be gone before then. What you mentioned, what's really good, you said a lot of the people that, you know, don't really follow football, they're going to go by the ADP. And whatever your website you're drafting, that's kind of where their rankings are. I think most of those websites sort by the rankings, correct? So a lot of times if you're drafting at Yahoo, ESPN, some guys will be ranked higher or lower than they should be, that I think. So it's really important. I think maybe right before draft, maybe one of the last episodes that I do, before it's heavy drafting time, the Labor Day weekend or the weekend before, really pinpointing some of those, because sometimes these websites will have players over or under ranked, and some guys will be ranked really low and you don't know why, or really high, and I think it's incorrect. So if you can really identify those players who are maybe ranked lower that you might be able to wait on, because yes, you're right. Some guy that doesn't know football, when he gets to the 7th, 8th round, he's just going to take what the system tells him to, whatever position he needs, while a much better player, if he scrolls down the list, might be there. So that's really a huge thing. ADP is important and the ranks are important from the websites, but it's good to really have your own ranks, because sometimes, one over-enthusiastic ranker on a website will have a guy ranked higher than he should be, or if they're all down on a player. Because sometimes groupthink, and this kind of get in the weeds, but groupthink in the fantasy football community, everyone kind of agrees about a player. Like, for example, unfortunately, that was Baker Mayfield last year, and I bought into that hype because being a Browns fan, everyone thought, oh, this, Baker broke the rookie touchdown. He's going to be the next Brett Favre. Everyone's got to get him, and it doesn't always work out that way. So sometimes you want to go against the group think, and you can get a player at value.
I think that theory and that idea of rankings, I think it comes really into play in the sort of 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th rounds, when you're looking at wide receivers. Especially, you look at a guy like a Justin Jefferson. He's going to get a run. He's going to get a run in Minnesota, and he's going to be a valuable guy, I think, to have there on your bench as a swing. And those are the rounds that I'm looking at guys like maybe a Jalen Reagor, maybe a Brandon Ayuk, maybe, one of these guys, and you'll pick these guys up because they are a swing at that, but a good value, good value at what you're getting. You're getting a guy to sit for 6 weeks and he doesn't have to do anything, and then maybe things start clicking or things start coming. The same as Jerry Jeudy, in Denver, but they have Cortland Sutton there, but is Cortland Sutton the guy? There's lots of questions around these guys, like Henry Ruggs, all these first round wide receivers this year, they're all getting picked up in those later rounds in the draft, and I think, as I said, there could be a lot of value to be had there.
Absolutely. I would say, and this is when we do our positional breakdown of quarterback, wide receiver, running back, we'll identify those guys that are going later that if they hit could win you the league. And when you're in your 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th round, you really want to draft players that have high upside, because, it's important to sometimes, if you have a top tier running back, to handcuff them. You can use one of the picks on that, but most of the picks you want to be high upside guys. Like Jalen Reagor is the perfect example, in my opinion. He played at TCU, who had a terrible quarterback situation for the most part. If he would have played at Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, any of those schools with a really good quarterback, he might be, people could be talking about him like, oh, he's a sure thing. So I think he has a really chance to go in there. Alshon Jeffrey is going to open the season on the PUP list. Deshaun Jackson, we won't get into that, but he kind of burned some goodwill with the Philly fans and a lot of people concerned about human rights, and what he said was awful. And JJ Arcega-Whiteside kind of dropped, didn't really perform last year, so there's a chance for him that he could boom. So you want to take those high upside guys late in your draft. And another thing I know we talked about is don't be too much of a homer. Look, I love Nick Chubb, but you don't want to take Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb's the back end of the first round, early second round guy. If you have the third or fourth pick, don't take, or let's say fifth or sixth, don't take Nick Chubb ahead of Alvin Kamara or Zeke or any of those guys, or Dalvin Cook, in my opinion. Maybe Dalvin Cook, that's a little closer, but I'm still taking Dalvin Cook over Chubb. So obviously you want to have fun and you want to get players on your team to root for, but you don't want to take too many of your favorite team's players, because trust me, take it from me, who took a lot of Baker Mayfield last year in some dynasty leagues, and you lose twice when your favorite team's offense sputters, and Freddie Kitchens is running into the ground, and your fantasy team isn't scoring very often, and you have to watch the Browns lose. So that's really important.
Just, I suppose, on the flip side of the kind of not being a homer, drafting players from your rival teams, Josh, how do you feel about that?
Look, I
know you have a love for the Steelers that you can't.
Yeah. Listen, everybody, if you've even met me once, you'll know that I hate those Yinzer piss towel waivers more than anything. I've been a Steeler hater since forever. I remember going to the game in the old Municipal Stadium, and some guy, was trying to teach me to say "F the Steelers" when I was like 5, 6 years old, and my mom got mad or whatever. But I've hated the Steelers forever. But on that same note, if I can get Juju Smith-Schuster at a good value, I'm taking him all day of the week. I actually drafted Juju at the end. Did I draft him or trade? I think I drafted him or picked him up on free agency a couple of years ago. The year that he really came out his rookie year, when he boomed later in the year, and he helped me win a title. So that Christmas Day, his late game heroics helped me win a fantasy football championship in my home league that year. And people say, "Oh, he's rooting for the Steelers." I'll say, look, whatever helps me win, that you can't put those kind of personal feelings aside for the franchise that you hate. If they have a really good player, you got to take them and win a championship. This isn't about personal feelings. It's about winning fantasy championships, and that's how you got to look at it.
I think the only Steeler I'm looking at this year is Deontay Johnson later on.
Yeah, he could. That's another. People think he's a popular breakout pick, and I can see it. I can. But you got to think Juju will be back to full health this year. But I can see Deontay Johnson because, when Roethlisberger's at quarterback, listen, I hate Roethlisberger more than you know. He's from Findlay, Ohio, which is about 20 minutes from where I grew up in Tiffin. And so whenever I go back to the area, people are Steelers fans because he was from around there. Good for them. But Ben Roethlisberger's a good quarterback, and their offense should be a lot better this year if he's back and he's healthy. So I think Deontay Johnson's one of those great later round picks who could pay huge dividends this year.
And finally, Josh, before we finish up, how do we do our homework? Where do we go to do our homework?
I would say if you're into Dynasty, obviously go to Dynasty League Football. It's a premium subscription, but honestly, I write for them. But we have trade analyzers. We have all these different tools. We have where you can compare ADP if you're doing an auction, which is a whole other animal. We have an auction value calculator. And honestly, I use DLF's rankings if I'm in a draft or doing anything. So if you love Dynasty, go to DLF, shoot me a DM. I can talk you through it or give you some Dynasty advice. But I would say this is the time to join a Dynasty league. For redraft, for subscriptions, I love 4for4 Fantasy. It's a site that I personally use. They have really good value-based rankings, not only for a week but for your drafts coming up, where you can sync your league and they take your scoring settings and really tell you, here's who you should pick and in what order based on your league's scoring settings, how many players you have to pick. So I'm a big fan of 4for4football.com. Also, Fantasy Pros, if you want free, they have a lot of good free resources as we talk on here. They have the free ADP for standard PPR, PPR and half PPR. They also do the consensus rankings. So they take the rankings from all the websites so you can kind of get a good picture of where guys are. It gives you a better average. So, because let's be honest, sometimes some sites love one guy or don't like one guy as much. So it kind of will kind of skew the rankings one way or the other. So it's so important to do your homework. If there's any other sites, if you're listening that you like, drop a comment. I know one that I use is Big Guy Fantasy. I used to write for them. Bob Long runs the site, and he actually, what he does, he looks at consistency. So he looks at how often are guys at least hitting that consistent point value from week to week. So yeah, Sammy Watkins had 40 points week 1 last year, but didn't do much the rest of the year. So he's not a guy you really want on your team, but there's other players that are more consistent from week to week. So that's another important thing to look at.
Excellent. And Josh, of course, we will be here in the coming weeks with positional breakdowns. After we get to position, we'll do a few positional breakdowns and we'll see where we're sitting then. We won't be far off. We won't be far off the majority of drafts at that point. So we'll also discuss in the coming weeks decisions, or if there's been any contracts or any trades or anything in the coming weeks that affect. We'll speak about them when we record. But that will do us for today. Thanks very much for joining us, Josh.
John, thanks for having me. If you want to give me a follow, I'm at Twitter at Josh Brickner, at JoshBrickner. Give our Cleveland Collective Twitter handle a follow as well. We got some great pods. I tell you that to listen to Chase and I's Buckeye podcast, but I'm not sure if there's going to be a second one due to the developments today. But
It appears to be a date from today.
Yeah, it does. It does. But if for something happens, I think there's a little, but to go follow Cleveland Collective, but I think there's some scuttlebutt where some of these teams want to play. So but we have some great pods talking about the Browns. Was that you or Neil who watched the Tribe game and to learn more about baseball?
That was Neil. That was
Neil
and Chuck. That's a bit of a slog. It's a 2-hour podcast, but it's quite funny. And Neil gets attacked by a giant moth in the middle of it, so I'd highly recommend
That's great.
For comedic value alone. But anyhow, that'll do us for today. Thanks everyone for listening to the Cleveland Sports Collective. Please follow the podcast at Cle Sports Pod and myself at John Cahill _IRL. And until next time, go Brownies, Indians, and Cats.